Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is going to contain my review of the latest summon showcase. It's another prize showcase this time around, featuring the leader of the apostles herself, Regina. She's appearing as a water blade, and of course, she features prominently in our current raid event, Faith Forsaken. We're now going to be able to summon her, play as her, with the showcase that drops tomorrow. And she looks like she has a pretty fun and interesting kit, but she comes at a time after two super lucrative summon showcases have come to a close. So earlier last week, we had a showcase bringing back all the past Gala Reborn Dragons, bringing back several Gala Dragalia adventurers on the day of the anniversary. And then afterward, we more recently got a showcase with Gala Zethia and Gala Bahamut, as well as some past Gala Dragons, including Gala Beast Volk. So we've had two back-to-back really good showcases that you may have spent your resources on, and in this video we'll try and answer the question of whether Regina is worth going for or not. One thing I want to remind y'all of course, particularly during the anniversary period, it never hurts to wait on these summon showcases until the last day to really go all out and pull for the character or dragon that you're going for. Part of that is the fact that we have free daily tenfold, so you wouldn't want to waste all your resources day one and then happen to get that character you were chasing after in just a free summon if you just would have waited a few days. So bear in mind, it's always going to be better to wait toward the end of the summoning period to do your summons. And also, the other piece that's critical, I think, is if you wait until the last day, you're going to get a preview in-game about what the next summon showcase or next banner is going to be, and that just gives you more information to weigh and decide whether you'd rather pull on that showcase or on the previous showcase. So keep those two things in mind. It is October. We know for sure we're getting XenoXilus as one of our Halloween alts for this month, and if past is precedent, these Halloween adventures in Dragalia Lost do tend to be seasonal. They tend to be limited, not part of the permanent summoning pool. So if you want to get them, usually the best time to do so is when they first release. So those are some factors outside of Regina's kit itself that may influence your decision here of whether or not to summon. For me, this is going to have to be a call that I make really as the showcase goes. I'm going to have to see what my summoning resources are like. Later today, I plan on summoning for Zethia and Bahamut, so I am prioritizing that particular banner over the Regina banner. And then we'll see how many resources I have left, what I have left to work with. You know, if I get anything for my free daily tenfolds, maybe I'll get Regina that way. But this is a call that I have yet to make for myself because those other variables are still up in the air, as well as just knowing what the next showcase is going to be too. So those are some things to think about. The other thing I want to point out with any of these review videos is that it is a first impression. Just with the timing, the way it works out, we only have one day where we know about the next banner and still are able to summon on the current banner. And that happens to be today at the time I'm recording this. So I have yet to play with Regina, I've yet to summon Regina, and personally I always wait until toward the end of a showcase to summon when possible. So I'm not going to be able to provide the hands-on impressions on these characters that you may be looking for. These are really first impressions based on reading the kit, analyzing that, and with my knowledge of the game, how I think that character would fit into current content. So that's another caveat that I want to give. There are some great content creators out there if you're interested in more of a formal analysis or an analysis that's done after summoning, and I'll post some links in the description if you're interested in more content like that. Alright, so our plan for today is to talk about Regina's kit. As for the question of whether or not you should summon, obviously you should summon to do your free daily tenfolds, but whether it's really worth chasing after Regina, right now I think the answer is no, and I think that the Zethia and Bahamut banner is a better use of your resources. And I'll try to explain why as we go through Regina's kit. Not that she doesn't look like a powerful and really interesting and fun adventurer, but as far as how I see her lining up against current content, I think that she's replaceable in that regard. For future content, there is some interesting potential though, so we'll also discuss that. So on the showcase, it is a prize showcase, which means that with every summon and every tenfold, you receive some prizes with a tenfold that's one per summon, and the final slot is guaranteed to be slightly better. So let's see here. The final prize, the 10th prize in a tenfold, is guaranteed to be platinum, gold, silver, or bronze. The problem with these prize showcases, there are some really good prizes, like platinum's great, gold is great. Silver has, some good outcomes and some not so good outcomes. But the fact that with the tenfold only a bronze is guaranteed, and they don't even describe bronze here, well, you can really miss with these, and it's total chance, as is summoning in general. But I think that prizes are a nice bonus, a cherry on top, if you will, but usually that's not the main reason that you're going to summon, unless they change the appearance rates for these in the future or something like that. But for now, this looks to be the same as it's been the past several prize showcases. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing I notice here is there's no other dragon, there's no other adventure at an appearance rate up based on what's shown here. And that is a real disadvantage to this showcase compared to the past couple Gala banners. Even the current Gala Dragalia has Bahamut, it has Beast Volk, pretty good dragons. It has Mars, a great dragon. And I shouldn't even say a great dragon, like all three of those are great dragons. Mars is not necessarily better than the other two. All three of those are great dragons. And then it has Thor and Cat Sith, which are still good, but only in certain content. So that banner had a lot of good opportunities to power yourself up with dragons. The previous banner with the past Gala Adventurers and Reborn Dragons had some really good dragons. And those tend to be one of the gateways or barriers to making yourself really strong in this game. Adventurers are often interchangeable, to some degree at least. There are certain mechanics or certain fights where you really need a particular type of affliction or dispel or something with a high hit count. There are some gatekeeping mechanics, but as far as general power level, it's often your dragons that you're equipping that are going to have the biggest impact on that, I think. So one consideration with this showcase compared to the previous couple is just, well, it's really just Regina or bust on this showcase. There's no consolation prize. I guess the platinum prize, would be a pretty good consolation prize if you happen to get it, but it's pure chance. So there's no other dragon or anything here. So any other 5-star you get is just going to be complete chance, off focus. So that's one thing I look at as far as the value of this. Now, we do get a lot of free daily tenfolds on this because this does last until the 15th, so it's going to be around for a while. As you can weigh your decision, I'm sure people will summon early or happen to pull Regina on their free daily tenfolds and have more impressions to share. But anyway, let's continue reading on here and actually get into Regina's kit, since with her being the only thing in appearance rate up, she should really be your primary decision or factor in your decision of whether or not you want to summon here. I do love her portrait, her design, like the sword, or blade I should say, looks really cool behind her, as well as Sandalphon with the over-the-shoulder kind of turnaround look there. She has her tablet, of course, and go, my fellow apostles, go forth and administer her authority. Looks great. Adventure details, commander of the apostles of the Ilian Church of Grams, observant and charismatic, she's the perfect person for controlling, or corralling rather, the ragtag group of apostles, a researcher who is gifted at alchemy. She shares a sigil with the angel Sandalphon. Cool. Okay, so let's read into her kits. Her first skill is Tactical Skewer, deals damage to surrounding enemies and activates additional effects based on which of the following buffs the user has. So if she has Preservation Protocol, grants the user a defense amp. That's pretty solid. Restoration Protocol restores the user's HP. Okay, that's fine. You probably are going to have a healer on your team. Maybe in an emergency, you might need to use that. And then Purification Protocol removes all afflictions from the user. Interesting that all three options are defensive. It only does 1 hit of damage, but it is a pretty high percent. 2400 is a pretty good damage mod on first skill with a relatively low skill energy required. The recovery potency's medium. It's not a huge heal that you'd get from a real healer, but it's okay. And then the defense amp, she has a team amp max level of 1. Affliction recovery is interesting since that will work for all afflictions. It might help in an emergency situation. But it's interesting that she's an attack unit based on what we see so far, because this strikes me as kind of like a defense kit, right? Defense amp, healing, affliction removal. It's only on the user though, and obviously the defense amp, the way those work, if you get enough user defense amps, eventually you get a team amp, but the others would only affect herself. So let's keep reading on here with what I think is a very cool skill, but not one that I actually think is going to be that important necessarily. Imperial Castling. It's shareable with a share point cost of 6, deals damage to surrounding enemies, and inflicts frostbite and 2 of the following: poison, burn, paralysis, stormlash, flash burn, shadow blight, or scourge rend. So it says 2 of the following. It doesn't say at random, but I take the meaning to be at random. It could also be that it afflicts 2 that are appropriate against the enemy you're fighting against. So for example, maybe the way this ends up working is like if you're fighting a wind foe, it burns them and scorch rends. If you're fighting a shadow foe, it paralyzes and flash burns. If you're fighting a water foe, it poisons and storm lashes. And if you're fighting a light foe, it poisons and shadow blights. That would be probably better than 2 at random in general, because a lot of the harder bosses in the game, they have 100% affliction resistance to afflictions that come from other types of elements. So for example, if you're playing the Sinister Dominion and you're battling against, let's say, Lilith, well, you're really only going to either paralyze or flash burn Lilith, or in the second phase of Master, you can frostbite her. Other types of afflictions are not going to do a whole lot for you in that fight without any kind of affliction res down being applied. So that's something to bear in mind. With Yaldabaoth, similarly, Yaldabaoth, you can burn. I think he has a 60% base res to burn and 0 to scorch rend, so that's favoring a more recent affliction over an older one. And then in the second phase, same thing. I think Yaldabaoth has like a 60% resistance to poison and a 0% to storm lash. So those 2 work in the second phase. But in this case, in Master difficulty, you can't even bring a Water Adventurer, so it'd just be talking about this shared skill, really. And Asura, their resistances were even cranked up a notch. So Asura has like 80% starting resistances to afflictions, from what I recall. And with Iblis, the afflictions are part of the core gameplay in that particular Sinister Dominion fight. And in Iblis's case, again, I guess Asura as well, like, you don't bring water adventurers to these fights in the highest difficulties, so it would really just be thinking about this as a shared skill. And here's where I see a weakness. Yes, this isn't too bad of a skill energy cost. It hits 7 times, decent damage considering you get 3 afflictions applied, frostbite, and then 2 others. But when you look at this as a shared skill, 11k SP for the shared skill energy required, that's going to be too high. If you wanted to use this as, let's say, your sole source of flash burn, because you're missing a flash burn character against Iblis Master difficulty, that's going to be too high to actually apply flash burn 4 times and survive that fight. So I don't think it actually works out super well in any of the current Sinister Dominion content. I feel like it might be fine against Lilith phase 2. Regina in general might be fine there because you do get the defense amp that's not affected by Curse of Nihility. You get a little bit of healing. Affliction removal, I guess, could matter, although she's stun res. I don't think Lilith even burns, so I don't really think that would actually matter. Basically just the defense amp mode that you'd probably be spamming. And but the funny thing is, like, against Lilith's already susceptible to frostbite and not susceptible to any of these other things in phase 2, so I just don't see this working particularly well. So of course we haven't talked about Agito and how this could stack up against the twins, but similarly I think we're going to see some potential weaknesses, but we'll keep reading about the kit. The other thing we haven't talked about either is the future. And we know Surtr is coming out as the final Sinister Dominion boss, and Surtr is going to start off as Flame Element, and so across all difficulties you're going to have to battle using Water Adventurers. In phase 2 of Master, you're also going to battle using Shadow Adventurers as well. But yeah, that may be the one place where Regina could actually really shine if Surtr's mechanics center around afflictions in some way, or he has really low affliction resistances. So let's keep reading on. She is a blade, so she has this strength co-ability, always a good one to see, and her chain co-ability is fairly basic here, giving a little bit of extra flame res when your HP is 80% or above. Her abilities are Sandalphin's Covenant 2, Stun Res 100%, and Afflicted Punisher 2. So let's start with the second two since they're a little bit shorter here and easier to get through, but Stun Res 100% is fine. You might prefer to see Burn Res at this point in the game because we recently, with this event, we recently got a Flurry Strength print that has the Wolf's Boon affinity. And if you're not aware, Wolf's Boon can give you 100% stun res in combination with the tutelary 20% skill damage 6-star, or not 6-star, but just extra slot Wormprint. Basically, you can easily get stun res 100% now from Wormprints. That's what I'm trying to say. So burn res is still a little bit more work to get. There are still some setups you can do to get it easily, but those are the two affliction resistances that are common to water element adventurers, which you might want to have. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but probably burn would have been a little bit better. And then Afflicted Punisher 2 increases damage to enemies inflicted with any affliction by 25%, also increases damage to enemies with 2 or more types of afflictions by up to an additional 15%, based on the number of different afflictions they are inflicted with, up to a maximum of 4. So if you can actually get up to 4 afflictions on something, yeah, this is potentially very, very good. But it's up to an additional 15%. So I guess if you have 2 afflictions, you get 5%. If you have 3 afflictions, you get 10%. If you have 4 afflictions, you get 15%, something like that. And it starts off with 25% no matter what if they have 1. One place where I could see this being sort of interesting is maybe like Morsayati Reckoning, a neutral element endgame boss that is afflictable by a variety of afflictions. This could actually be pretty good there. Maybe if they release Elysium as a similar style of boss in the future, or Bahamut, then this could be kind of interesting against those enemies as well. But in general, most bosses are not set up to where you can afflict them with 4 different afflictions. Okay, so now we read Sandalphin's Covenant 2. At the start of quests, inflicts the Locked Sigil debuff on the user for 300 seconds, so she works very similarly to other Apostle characters. They start off with this debuff where their sigil is locked, but grants them the Preservation Protocol effect. If the user continues to charge their Force Strike, the effect granted to them will change every 1.5 seconds. It will cycle through Preservation Protocol, Restoration Protocol, and Purification Protocol in that order. Locked Sigil's remaining time is reduced by 9 seconds each time the user uses Tactical Skewer, and by 30 seconds each time the user removes an affliction from an ally. So I guess the couple ways you could do that, one would be removing an affliction from herself using Purification Protocol. The other way would be if you give her some kind of shared skill that cleanses afflictions on your team, then and you actually cleanse, then that could also work potentially. When the Locked Sigil effect wears off, the user will be granted the Sigil Released effect instead. Sigil Released grants the user Preservation Protocol, Restoration Protocol, and Purification Protocol. Okay, so in case you need a reminder on what those are, we talked about those with the very first skill. But when her Sigil is locked, you get to choose one of these. Starting on Preservation Protocol, if you hold down your Force Strike, you can switch to one of the other ones by waiting 1.5 seconds. But in general, the Preservation Protocol is the one you're going to want to use the most to get the defense amp up to a team amp anyway. And the others are more like in case of emergency. But once your sigil gets released after 300 seconds or sooner, because you're going to be spamming Tactical Skewer, once that happens, you get all 3 of these effects every time you use Tactical Skewer. And that's actually really pretty good self-sustain. So if there is some merit here, I could see this being a character that maybe you want to have for Surtr for auto battle purposes, applying team defense amps, healing herself, removing afflictions from herself. I am seeing the appeal there, especially if Surtr has any kind of, affliction related weaknesses that you want to exploit with Imperial Castling. So maybe that's the idea behind Regina here, that she's more about future content. That really might be pretty good. there are other characters in the water element that are very tanky, like Gila Elisan, but in some ways they're debilitated by Curse of Nihility, so this could be a character that works well despite Curse of Nihility removing most types of buffs. And let's see if there's anything left to discuss here. So as far as Surtr goes, I could see Regina being really good, but we just don't know that much about that content. The last thing I wanted to circle back on was the twins. If you're still working on Ayaha and Otoha, whether that be in Legend difficulty or some of the earlier difficulties, there is a certain appeal to Imperial Castling because Ayaha and Otoha have 2 different states that they can be in, and their affliction resistances change depending on the state that they're in, and you have to hit them with an appropriate kind of affliction to eliminate that state. So for example, in the Legend difficulty, at some points in the fight, you'll only be able to deal 1 damage to them until you afflict them with Frostbite or another damage over time affliction. And similarly, there are other parts of the fight where they'll ramp up strength until they get stunned or they get hit with freeze or sleep, some type of immobilizing affliction. The challenge I see with this Imperial Castling is that Frostbite by itself already is enough to stop that, basically. Like, all of these afflictions are in the same bucket of damage over time. So if this had freeze, if this had sleep or something, stun tacked onto it, that might be a little bit more interesting because then that could remove both of those buffs, if you will, or both those special effects from Ayaha and Otoha. But as things are, like, this is no different than just any character doing Frostbite normally. In fact, in Master, a lot of the resistances for Ayaha and Otoha are up to 100% anyway, so you can't use these off-element afflictions on them. I think in Legend that might not be the case. Maybe you can use some of those, but again, essentially their Frostbite basically serves the purpose, and you can't even afflict them in the Berserk phase until you dispel them several times, and as you can see, Dispel is not something in Regina's kit. So I think that really in that content, Regina might be tanky and that might be kind of good. Like, removing all afflictions could be good in Legend because in Legend, the twins can cause Scorch Rend, and there's no way of curing that currently. So I guess that could be good. You could heal yourself from that. But otherwise, I feel like the only piece of what's needed for that fight that Regina really fulfills is being a Frostbite enabler. Like, she doesn't bring Dispel, she doesn't bring a high hit count or anything like that. She doesn't bring overdamage, she doesn't bring freeze. So yeah, I don't see her being like super necessary. I'm sure she could work and be fine. You know, if Legend is susceptible to more than just Frostbite when they're in the state that you have to use Frostbite, like maybe there's sometimes you could use this Afflicted Punisher past the 25% mark up to maybe 40% that it can get up to here. Like maybe when they're frozen and Frostbite, at least you'd get 30%. But yeah, I don't see it being super good, the kit overall. Like, not bad by any means, but each character on your team in solo has to really fulfill a certain purpose. And then in co-op play, I'm sure you could find some rooms as Regina, but you're also going to need to have somebody that checks off the box of healing. You need somebody that's going to dispel. You need somebody with a high hit count. And so, you know, the latter two can be fulfilled by a Lapis, the first by a healer, but there are limited slots available is what I'm trying to say. So I think that Regina is not a must-have for current content. Surtr is where she has the most potential, but with that being unknown, it makes it a little hard to justify going for her now. I certainly could see her being pretty good in auto builds of that fight when that releases, but that's pretty much my opinion for now. So current Sinister Dominion, not much point, but sure, fine against Lilith. Surtr, probably going to be pretty good, and twins, good as a Frostbite enabler, pretty strong character it seems like, but otherwise, nothing special. Alright, y'all, that is going to do it for today. I hope you enjoyed this look at Regina and this prize summon showcase. I'm going to be summoning later today for Zethia and Bahamut, so stay tuned for a video on that, and stay tuned for a video on the Faith Forsaken event as well. Still have one of those coming, and now I've read through the epilogue, have a lot to say on it. Alright though, that is going to do it once again for today's video. Thank you as always for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.